jazz people. Today I'm going to talk about writing for a clarinet in a big band setting. So traditionally, reed players in big bands, well, in the 1920s, they played saxophone, they doubled on clarinet, but they also had to double on violin. That's true. That by the 1930s, that started to be less and less. In fact, some players continued to double on violin. Ray Nance, who was a trumpet player, also doubled on violin, so there was a little bit of that. But violins got phased out by the 30s, pretty much. But the clarinet remained a double all the way through the swing era, and pretty much through the 40s, through the 50s. In the 1960s, I heard an interview with Duke Ellington where the interviewer said, "Duke, all the other bands have gotten rid of the clarinet. Why do you still have a clarinet?" And he said, "Clarinet is the sound of New Orleans, and it's the sound of jazz. And as long as I'm creating music, I want to have that option. I want to have that sound in my band." And the thing is that saxophone players don't really like to double on the clarinet. They don't like playing the clarinet. It's very difficult. It's much more difficult than the saxophone. Frank West was a great alto and tenor player and great flute player, but a lot of people don't know this, but he told me, and we talked about it, he was actually an excellent clarinet player, but he hated to play the clarinet. And he said the clarinet was invented by two guys that didn't know each other. So the thing is that the saxophone, you have an octave key, and so when you're playing, you press the octave key, it puts it up an octave. On the clarinet, it's an octave and a fifth, and that can be confusing. Also, you have open holes on the clarinet. It's a much more difficult instrument, and the embouchure also more difficult. So a lot of saxophone players are not very good doublers. So you may want to keep the clarinet parts off of their parts. In my band, well, we have Dan Block, who plays the top tenor part, and he's a great clarinet soloist, and also he plays parts great. So I give him the hard stuff to do and the solos. The other guys, they don't really want to solo on the clarinet, but they can play parts. They're good doublers because they do Broadway shows, and you need to be a good doubler to do that. As far as writing for the clarinet, it's nice to be able to have some clarinet solos, kind of written out things so guys can play written parts, and that gives you an option. Clarinet is not as loud an instrument as the saxophone, so you have to keep that in mind. It gets combined with saxophones a lot. Probably the most famous big band sound is the Glenn Miller Moonlight Serenade, where it's voiced with clarinet on top of two altos and two tenors. And the top four voices are voiced in four-part close harmony. And then the bottom tenor has the octave doubling of the top part. Sounds a bit cheesy to me. Ellington was using clarinet lead quite a bit in the 1930s before Miller even had a band, and but he mostly would open up the voicings, mostly like drop two, like that kind of stuff, or more interesting kind of voicings. And then when Ellington added a fifth saxophone, he would often write five-part harmony. Those kind of interesting sounds, more dissonant and more dense kind of voicings. I think that stuff sounds great. Yeah, you might want to keep the clarinet a bit above the other saxophones if you put them like a whole step apart, which you can do with saxophones. Unless you're doubling at the octave, that whole step, the saxophone will overpower the clarinet right next to him. So you may not want to do it. You might want to open up your voicing, and that will help. Sometimes it's nice to use really open voicings. Putting like a seventh between the clarinet and the next saxophone down. That's really nice. Very effective. That way the clarinet is not in competition with the other saxophones. He's far enough above that his voice will carry. So the clarinet it can be a dated kind of a thing, like if you're trying to get like a swing era sound, but it can also be pretty hip, depending upon the kind of voices that you use and the kind of spacings that you use. I encourage it. It gives you a different a different sound out of the saxophone section. And you can get pretty tired of just 5 saxophones all the time. Sometimes it's nice to have doubles. So that's it for the clarinet for right now. Next time we'll talk about some other doubles. So please like and subscribe. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.